Calling all film fanatics and culture lovers, it's showtime. Cultures and Communities Fest is coming soon, both virtually and in person, to a movie palace near you. CCF features a full week of candid conversations, moving pictures, and unforgettable events, all focused on holistic health and social wellness. Come celebrate culture with your community this September 6th through the 12th. Go to mkefilm.org/CCF for more information.
I'm Dante McFadden. I'm the programmer with Black Lens Film, and I'm also one of the contributing programmers for the Cultures and Communities Festival, which will take place 6th through the 12th. And one of our virtual offerings is a compelling film, documentary and reflection, A Walk with Water. Filmmaker Emmett Brennan explores the Owens Valley to look at the depletion of water supply throughout Los Angeles along a 200-mile trek. And to talk more about this film, I'd like to invite the filmmaker himself, Emmett, to join me. So Emmett, thank you very much for taking part in this conversation.
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So first and foremost, I want to thank you very much for making this important film. Second, I want to congratulate you on being part of the Cultures and Communities Festival.
Yeah, well, thank you for putting this festival on. It's a great service.
I appreciate that. I want to start off by asking you to talk about your background with regards to filmmaking, and then also your other personal endeavors, just to set the context for our conversation.
Totally. Well, I've been doing film for, I don't know, maybe a decade now. I dropped out of college to start filming, and kind of went immediately into telling stories that look at how we can adapt human behavior in order to support the conditions for life. And on a personal level, I've tried to orient myself and my livelihood and my work and my living situations around that idea and that experiment. So I've actually lived in communities for the last decade doing earthwork and looking at systems of governance and how to relate as a people in a way that's sustainable and different support systems. So currently I live in a little community in California. It's kind of like a little hobbit village, actually. We all share a little central cob kitchen, and we've all built our own little structures around that kitchen. And here I am in the forest doing film work.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about us having this virtual conversation, for those who see your film, they'll be able to see your home. And the fact that you're talking to me from your home, I think offers another level of that engagement with you and your living space. Your previous film, entitled Inhabit, focuses on agriculture, and Reflection, A Walk with Water, touches upon agriculture and the way it's affected by LA's declining water supply. And how did you come to decide that you were going to make Reflection based on this particular issue?
Do you mean the particular issue of water, or its connection to agriculture?
Both.
Both, yeah. Okay, well, water, because water touches all things, everything is connected and made of water. So there's this way in which, if we can reorient our relationship with water in a life-giving way, then a lot of the ailments that we're experiencing, I think, will naturally be addressed and perhaps resolved. So yeah, and I grew up on the East Coast and just didn't have much of a mind for water. I wasn't paying attention to water because it was so abundant, and it just wasn't a thought. But when I moved to California, just the reality and the starkness of the drought here and the misuse of water, all that became really clear to me. So just felt like wow, there's a really important story to tell about how we're designing our lives around water in a way that's just completely depleting our supplies, destroying ecosystems, and ultimately what the film is about is how in the design of human life we're breaking the water cycle on this planet, and not just the big water cycle where water evaporates off the ocean, but more importantly the small water cycle where water's moving through the bodies of trees and vegetation to form clouds and to hydrate the atmosphere where it then rains and repeats that cycle. So as we're clear cutting forests for agriculture or paving it over for cities or whatever we're doing in transforming the surface of the earth, whenever we're hardening the surface or getting rid of vegetation, we're breaking that small water cycle, which is collapsing the climatic conditions that make life possible. So it's like, how can we redesign human life in a way that keeps that movement of water around alive? Because otherwise we're kind of, it's not looking good.
Absolutely. And what's at the centerpiece of your documentary is the 200-mile trek that you document. And how did you come to learn about and know the people who organized this trek? And while the film shows, you know, what you learned about the declining water supply along this path, and you talk about how you came to, you just shared now about how you came to learn about this issue and how you came to understand its urgency. What did you learn about not only this trek, but also the people who participated in this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what you're talking about for the viewers is the kind of central through line of the film, which is this 200-mile pilgrimage next to the Los Angeles Aqueduct. And there's a really important story about how LA has supported its metropolis through pulling water from hundreds of miles away, and one of those main locations being the Owens Valley, which at one point was this super lush, amazing landscape in the Eastern Sierras that was tended to and stewarded by the indigenous people of that place for thousands of years. And through LA's pumping and siphoning, diverting rivers and creeks and pulling water from lakes up there, that valley, the Owens Valley, has turned into essentially a desert. So we, a whole group of walkers that I discovered just through community connections and being pointed in the right directions, a whole large group of us, including a bunch of indigenous people who are kind of guiding the journey, we just walked following the route of the aqueduct from the Owens Valley back to the city in often quiet contemplation and just being witness to the changes and listening to stories along the way to remember what this place once was, and to really see the legacy of what happens when you take water away, and then also to just be in a dreaming of what else is possible. So the film kind of goes into all these little exposés and explorations of what it looks like to redesign or how we could be in a different relationship, and the walk kind of tees up a lot of the questions that are then attempted to be answered through those other scenes.
Indeed. And if you could say more, about, what you learned about the indigenous communities that first inhabited this land. Just because there's a moment in the film that talked about, how they understood water, how they understood fire, and how veering away from those practices has led to the situation that you document in your film.
Yeah, totally. I can speak to it a little bit, and it's also not totally my place to speak to, so I'll try to be gentle. But in my learning and observation, and the folks that I have been in relationship with, it feels as though a lot of it, for instance, the Paiute people in the Owens Valley and the way they talk about their ancestors and how they cared for this place, it was a really relationally focused stewardship where they understood the connection between things. And so when they were working with water, they were trying to move it in a way that spread it out and sunk it into the ground and stored it, and tried to get it to life, to move it through life, instead of channeling it and bringing it to this one location in order to use it for this one specific purpose. But how do you actually, you know yeah, I don't feel like I'm being as coherent as sometimes I am on this topic, but
Yeah, I think what you shared about about it in terms of how you cultivate those those natural sources. I think really gives anyone who's seen this film or who wants to see this film, and they hear this conversation prior to it. I think it gives an important insight of what to look for. Just the multiple layers of what you cover in your film.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So I certainly appreciate the extent of what you've talked about, and then also acknowledging the importance of the indigenous communities, to speak even more abundantly about it. And as we're having this conversation, there's been in the news within the last few weeks of small towns, particularly in California, that have burned down completely. And as people see this film, just having known of these tragedies, how would you encourage them to be involved, in the, these ecological matters, or what you described at the beginning of the conversation as earthwork, even in the face of these disasters? Because as people come to know the urgency, there's that concern that it might be too late to respond.
Yeah, man, it's so daunting being in California and living in these forests and seeing the level of work that needs to be done. Uh, it's a lot, but there's a way to begin, and I think the government is trying to make more resources available, and in the county that I live in, they've been successful in doing that. So there are a lot of people who've started to do the work of clearing forests and doing prescribed burns, and there are resources that you can reach out to in order to learn to do your own prescribed burns, or work with teams of people who are starting to make that happen, where you go in and you take down the dead vegetation and do these low forest cover burns that clear out all this fuel that would otherwise, help send these fires into the canopies. Um, yeah, I think it's just about assessing where you live, and what could help your little area, be responsible for where you live, and find ways to work with that place, and hope that your neighbors and other people are doing the same thing. And then, where I live, we're starting to create these coalitions of neighborhoods where we're all working together to figure out how can we make this area safer as a connected area of people living on this land. Um, yeah, I think you're
And
muted,
so
right?
you spoke, got it. And so you spoke of how, earlier about water and this connection to agriculture. In your film, you feature, some farmers, and you also feature some scientists as well. How did you first come across these people, and what was it like to cultivate that relationship where they felt comfortable talking about their experiences on camera as well as sharing their knowledge?
Yeah, totally. Well, the farmers, my partner actually worked at that farm, so there'd been a couple year relationship with those two, and it was really easy in. Um, and then the case with pretty much all of the characters in the film is they're all really closely connected amongst a certain community of people and of folks doing similar work. So, um, I'd build a relationship in this one place with this person, and then they'd connect me to the next person, or I already had like tons of different connections to this person. So it felt like it was all in the family. Um, and I kind of feel like that feeling comes through in the film a little bit, or at least that's been reflected. There's just a certain nice soulfulness. I just love all the people in the film. So
Yeah, and I think that comes across quite well. The love that you show and the attention that and space that you give them,
yeah,
the
thanks.
attention and the space that you give them, to talk about how they're combating this depletion of water that they're facing. I made a mention earlier about where you're talking to us from right now, and there's moments throughout the film that contain your narration, and there's some moments where you directly address the camera. And I wanted to know, what informs this personal style of filmmaking, that you see in the film.
Yeah, yeah. I totally didn't imagine or want to go in that direction. I'm not someone who loves to be featured on camera. So the first iterations of the film didn't include anything about me, at least explicitly, Um, but as I was sharing the film for feedback from friends and colleagues, there was this repeated note from folks that was like, we can feel the filmmaker in this film very strongly already, just because it's a journey film, and there's a way that my voice was coming through without me actually being present, or without my voice being present. And it, I just was called upon by all sorts of people to step in and step up, because it wasn't going far enough into the realm of me being a narrator character, but it also wasn't. But I was present enough that there was like a curiosity and a question of like, who is this filmmaker? What is this journey? Like there were these unanswered questions, and so it just took me becoming more courageous and owning the nature of the film more, to step in and be like, okay, I do have something to share. I do have something to say that can support the story of this film to be more clear and more deep. And ultimately, I was building this film at the same time that I was editing. I was building this house at the same time that I was editing the film. And there was this really beautiful synergy between the two, where I was getting to understand my creative process in how the two projects reflected each other. The way I was approaching the editing was exactly the same as the way I was approaching the house, and the two things just started to feel really married to me. And at some point, I was like, "Oh, I think this house needs to be in the film, and I think my life here needs to be in the film." Anyway, I could go on and on about this, but I'm really glad that the house ended up in the film, and that my life here ended up as a little bit of a gentle backdrop. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of any filmmaker talk about the making of their film while also talk about the building of a house. But
Mhm.
I think that is such a on target metaphor in
Mhm.
terms of constructing a story,
Yeah.
while also constructing a physical space to live in.
hmm
Yeah,
it was also essential for me at a very personal level, because editing film is so heady. It's so much computer time. You can just float away and get just so cerebral and ungrounded. I can, at least. It was not. I don't always love it, honestly. So having this really deeply embodied physical hammering, screwing, lifting heavy things, and creating a physical structure, that is a completely necessary counterbalance to the work of editing this film.
yeah, it's like a meta narrative within the narrative.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and as you're screening this film across the country, um, are you aware of any efforts of organizations, who want to screen your film to raise awareness and to encourage advocacy for the earthwork that you describe and that you document in this film?
Honestly, we're at the early stages of starting to figure out who these partners are and how to maximize impact with this film. So certainly they're like all the folks in the film and their organizations. We're we're in conversation with and trying to figure out how to use this film. But it's early in this process, and I haven't figured it out yet. But um, it feels like the response that we're getting from viewers and how people are being impacted by the film makes me feel that there is real impact that this film can have if we find a way to use it well. So trying to figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I wish you the best, and I'm sure as word gets out about Reflection and Walk with Water, I'm sure that urgency will increase, and I'm sure those partnerships will build. Thank you very much, Emmett Brennan, for making this film. And before we conclude here, just now that I've gotten the serious questions out of the way, one question I do have for you. I wouldn't say it's completely not serious, but how, as you talk about your film and as you describe your film, whether people have seen it or not, does Chinatown ever come up at all? That film?
I feel silly. I still haven't actually seen Chinatown, and everyone's been talking about it. Not everyone. I've been told I should watch Chinatown. Um, it hasn't come up a lot, and we only kind of briefly go into the history of LA in this film, and obviously LA plays an important role in the film, but I intentionally avoided the political realm in this film, which was a strong choice because politics plays a huge part in water and in our control of water and in water rights and all that stuff. And it's a really important story that needs to be told. But I really wanted to focus more on the kind of spiritual, ecological aspect of how to be in relationship with water and with life in general, and trying to paint a picture of what else is possible and leave people in an imaginal realm. So it just didn't feel like the political angle was the best angle for that. And I think Chinatown is a pretty political film, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think the way you just described the route that you wanted to go, I think was completely the appropriate route. And I just bring that up because being familiar with Chinatown and seeing your film, they just seem like unlikely companion pieces to one
Love
another. So that was just a curiosity that I had.
Okay, well, maybe now I'll watch Chinatown with your encouragement.
Indeed. Emmett Brennan, thank you very much for your film, Reflection and Walk with Water, and thank you very much for your time. And glad to have your film as part of the Cultures and Communities Festival.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun talking.
Absolutely.